My intention is for you to have your heart not changed, but touched. And I hope that someone who hears this really needs to hear it. Because Connor's story is one that is very strong and powerful. Sometimes when we share our stories of hard times, it can really help us to encourage ourselves when we look back on what we've gone through, but also to encourage others, because at least for me, it's good to know that I'm not alone and that I haven't been alone in the difficult and dark places that I have been. So wherever life's journey finds you today, I do hope that you can open your heart and listen to what Connor Lamb has to say.
You know, at UGA, I used to be the pinnacle of a Christian. I used to be the professional Christian. I used to be the representative of a Christian on UGA's campus, and used to be praised for that. And then in a matter of weeks, days, really, I went from being the pinnacle of what a Christian is, of who Christian is, to being told by many Christian leaders and by many Christian institutions as a whole that I could no longer be a Christ follower.
Welcome to Loving Kindness Every Day, where you will hear everyday language such as 4-letter, 5-letter, or words that your mother might call profanity. Please be advised.
In the interest of time, I will say that you being the pinnacle of a Christian role model.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like, right? At UGA, to then, did you say 2 days, 48 hours? It was a very specific amount of time, not a very long time. Boom, everything changes. Like, right? So can you talk to me about that? What happened?
Yeah.
Like, I'm here for that.
Oh,
Tell me what happened.
yeah. So I think just to kind of describe the kind of Christian climate at UGA, I very much grew up. I'm from East Cobb, Roswell, Georgia. Very much grew up in a Christian bubble. Went to a private school, Methodist private school. Went to a mega Baptist church. Was very involved in both of those things. Worked at Chick-fil-A. So pretty much everything that I did was Christian. And so going into college, a lot of people think that like, oh my God, like it's going to be a huge culture shock and whatnot. And that's true for a lot of people. But in reality, when I went to UGA, I immediately plugged myself right back into the Christian culture there. And there is a very real Christian bubble that exists on the campus of the University of Georgia as well. There are dozens of campus ministries. There are 100+ churches in Athens, with church plants coming every year. Like there's a plant that's coming from Hillsong and from Elevation that are both starting up this year. And so in reality, Athens is very much a booming city, especially when it comes to Christian culture. Wow. And so when I started going to UGA, the main places that I inserted myself in were a ministry on campus called Wesley. It's a Methodist ministry. It's probably the largest on-campus ministry that they have there. I was not super involved in my later years, but we'll kind of get there a little bit later. But in the beginning of college, that was somewhere that I really identified with. And then I became a brother at a fraternity called Beta Upsilon Chi, which stands for Brothers Under Christ. BYX, or Bucks, as you more call it. And it's been around for almost 20 years on the campus. And when I first started in the fraternity, it wasn't that big. But over time, and over the time that I was in it for the couple of years, it ended up growing to about 150 members, which really was one of the largest fraternities on campus. Oh, wow. We ended up acquiring a house on Millage Avenue, which is like the fraternity row. That was 14,000 square feet. It was actually technically the largest fraternity house at UGA, excuse me. And although there's another fraternity that argues that they're 100 square foot more than we are, but it's not true. But yeah, so in reality, the fraternity very much grew in size. Was a very large fraternity. It was very Christian. There are a lot of fraternities that call themselves Christian, but they really aren't. But this fraternity you sign a covenant when you first join. And basically the first one is talking about not drinking alcohol when you're under 21 and not abusing alcohol when you're over 21. So it's a dry fraternity. There's no alcohol at any events that we have. There's no alcohol involved allowed in our house. And there are very strict rules on alcohol. So when it comes to the rest of the fraternities at UGA, that already sets us apart. And then the other one is the idea of fleeing from sexual immorality. But most of the guys in the chapter and in BYX as a whole interpret that as not having premarital sex. And so when I joined the fraternity, that's kind of how I interpreted that as well. And so already that just kind of sets it apart as a very different fraternity than the rest at UGA. And I will say it was an incredibly Christian, Christ-centered organization. There was definitely a lot of fun there, but we had a lot of worship nights. There was a lot of Christian transformation that kind of happened through there. And I ended up, was a leader in a lot of aspects. I was in charge of the house and lived in the house my junior year and senior year. But I also was our pledge chaplain. So every fraternity has a pledgeship at UGA. It's 6 weeks long. And the pledge chaplain at our fraternity is basically the guy who was in charge of the Christian aspect of pledgeship and really the spiritual growth of our pledges. And for many in our fraternity, pledgeship is a very growing season spiritually. And so I pretty much was like the pastor of that time and would give sermons every week. And many guys opened up to me in a very deep way through that experience. And then the last place that I was really connected in Athens was Athens Church. Athens Church was kind of a partner / plant church from the larger North Point body. But Athens Church does not stream Andy Stanley every Sunday. If they ever do show Andy Stanley messages, they were always past messages. They were never live. And about half the time, Athens Church would have their own live speakers. They're a part of North Point's Irresistible Church Network, but again, they're not technically a North Point church. They have a lot of North Point similarities, but they don't have all the ministries of North Point. And the church is run a lot differently than North Point and has a lot of its own theology than North Point. And while I was working there, I originally started in our kids ministry in Upstreet, but I ended up moving into a new role that I created, which was our college outreach director. And I was a part-time staff member there, and basically my job was to be the face of our college ministry. And Athens Church by far had the biggest college ministry of any church in Athens. We would do events once a month called college nights. There were about 1,000 plus student gatherings that happened in our auditorium that were very similar to like a Passion-y experience. And were really incredible. And we've had a lot of speakers there from Sadie Robertson and some others who have spoken to those events. So it definitely has a very wide reach. And at those events, I would be photographed all the time. I pretty much knew everybody. Again, I was kind of the face of the ministry. And so at UGA's campus, I was kind of known as the Christian guy, as the guy. And even in our fraternity, a lot of guys looked up to me kind of as the Christian role model, as the Christian leader, just because of the positions that I was in, and same with the church that I worked for. And at the time, I was also planning on going into ministry and becoming a pastor and going into seminary after school at Dallas Theological Seminary. But a little bit of a detour happened. Yeah, so basically, I have experienced same-sex attractions since I was 5, and I remember opening up to my parents about that back at that young age. I don't know if they really even remember this experience, but I remember when I was 5, I think I told my mom I had a crush on a boy, and kind of something happened, and she ended up spanking me for about 30 minutes. And I don't think that she even realizes what she was doing at that time, but from a very young age, it was very clear from my family and from the world that this part of me was not moral, that it was not correct, and that it was wrong. And so going from that was something that I kind of hid for a very long time. Going into elementary and middle school, I was bullied a lot. I'm not the most feminine of guys out there, but I'm not really the biggest sports fan either. I like to sing. I usually had a lot more girlfriends than guy friends. And so especially in a Christian middle school, the word gay gets thrown around a lot. And in reality, I don't think people really calling me gay as in a homosexual. I just think that the word gay and shit kind of became a tandem. You know, if someone called you gay, they were just calling you shitty. And so I remember, especially in middle school, I was like, no, I'm not gay. Like, this can't, like, no, I'm not. Because I also didn't want to be shitty. And I also knew that this was not okay just from my own parents and personal experience. And so I really kind of repressed that. And also, I think especially in the areas and at the time that I was growing up, the kind of narrative was that being gay wasn't actually a thing. That you were same-sex attracted, but you were still straight. You know, and because of the environments that I grew up in, I had never actually met a real gay or queer person until I got to college, just because of the circles that I ran in. Not at school, not at church. I think I ran into someone at Chick-fil-A, but it wasn't, I had never really had a real relationship, even friendship, with someone who was LGBTQ until I got to college. And so really throughout middle school and high school, I just kind of thought that I was straight, like fervently believed that I was straight, but that I just had this same-sex attraction on the side. And so I tried to date girls in high school to no avail. The only time that I ever really kissed girls was for musical theater, and that was gay on so many levels. And so but I still fervently believed in my heart that I was straight, even to the point where my junior year of high school, I like shared my testimony on stage with a bunch of my peers on a mission trip, and said that I was not gay, because I that wasn't a lie, because at the time I fervently believed that I wasn't. And so going from that into college, I still had the same thought. I did not think that I was gay. I just thought that these same-sex attractions would go away. I just thought that I was going to meet the right girl, and God would do the rest. And I'd never opened up to anybody about my same-sex attractions until my sophomore year. In that fraternity, BYX, I used to be called the BYX therapist. Like, everyone would come and like talk to me about their issues. And a guy ended up coming to me my sophomore year and telling me about his same-sex attractions. And I remember just feeling so convicted by the Spirit of like, oh my God, Connor, like, this is your time. Like, you need to share this. And so I shared it back with him. And I remember we both cried for like 10 minutes just because neither one of us had ever shared that aspect of ourselves before. And neither one of us were really attracted to each other. And so we kind of were able to confide in each other about our same-sex attractions. But even at that time, I still fervently believed that it was sinful. And fervently believed that was not something that I could participate in. But at the same time, around the same time as when I started on staff at Athens Church, and one of the really blessings that came from being on staff was that they were very encouraging of getting into counseling. And so I ended up getting a Christian counselor. And the first meeting that I had with him, I shared my testimony with him without the gay part, and then was like, so there's also something else I need to tell you. I like men. But I was like, and I followed it up with, but I know that that's sinful, and I want to like women. And secretly, he was actually affirming, but he didn't tell me that because he didn't want to shape my own beliefs. I think he wanted me to kind of get there on my own. And so there were a couple of conversion therapy tactics that I personally wanted to kind of go through. That we kind of went through and that I went through by myself. And this was really now into the fall semester of junior year of college. And
can I ask you about that? Can we do a pit stop?
Yeah.
Conversion therapy?
Yeah.
A little bit? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's
you said I wanted to go through.
Yeah.
You said I wanted to go through.
Yeah. So I've been reading a book recently called The Velvet Rage, and I've been doing a book club through Renovis for that. And in that book, it talks about the fact that in reality, this secret that we harbor for so long, homosexuality and same-sex attraction, isn't really a secret to us. It's a secret that we have to the rest of the world. But the real secret to us is our own self-hatred. and I remember that was in the first chapter of the book, and it really hit me. And so I think really where the whole desire for conversion therapy came out of was a self-hatred. Was a hatred for a part of myself that I wanted to change, and that many people in the conservative Christian world encouraged me that it could. And so I did a lot of research online about conversion therapy. Never if it was valid or not, just how to do it. And so I didn't do anything medical. Like some people say that if you use more testosterone or work out or do all these things that then you'll be attracted to women. Mine was a lot more spiritual and physical. Which is kind of crazy, some of the stuff that it did, but a lot of it had to do with female pornography and prayer around female pornography.
Make me like this guy.
Yes.
Things.
And having other people pray for you while you were watching female pornography.
Whoa.
Yes, which was a very uncomfortable experience.
Is this like church orchestrated? Like, are people doing this?
Yes, very much so.
Whoa.
Which is weird because, like sexual morality and especially pornography is so taboo, even to talk about in the Christian culture. And so the fact that people encourage you to fall into that, it was crazy to me. It's like, okay, so you're going to say that same-sex attraction is a sin, but we're going to try to beat that with a different sin? Like, what? I don't think that's going to work.
This one is a better sin. We like this one better.
Yeah, really. And I'm like, and it didn't work, newsflash. But
yeah.
The conversion therapy really ended with my counselor encouraging me to date a woman. And to try to see what that was going to be like. And specifically, see if I would get, and I don't know if you're going to have to edit this out or not, but see if I would get aroused.
So, just so that you know, you haven't probably heard the show. This is an everyday show. People are going to say all types of words. The words you say, if you say shit or fuck or erection, like, you're not going to get edited.
Okay.
Like, like I told you before, I feel the stories are important.
Okay.
And I feel like I don't care about the bullshit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, honestly, like, we're just talking heart to heart.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually wild. I didn't realize that that's a thing.
Yeah, huge thing. So,
whoa.
So yeah, and so really, like, the whole point of all of this was to see whether or not I would get an erection. Was if you watch this pornography, if you did certain things, was this going to happen? Now, the extreme of conversion therapy is shock therapy, but that's never something that I experienced and never something that I really wanted to go through. I think as a world, or at least as an American world and a Christian conservative world, we are taking steps away from that. But, for me, a lot more of it was spiritual. That's something that we have not stepped away from.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my goodness, like, how did you feel about the results?
Yeah. Incredible sense of shame. Like, I mean, and it's also like, there's no roadmap for attraction. So, like, it's kind of even hard to define attraction. Like, and there's so many different types of attraction now that I've learned, but, like, at that time, and especially in the Christian culture, all we think about is physical attraction. And for me, also being someone who's very success-driven, I'm an Enneagram 3-wing 2, like, the fact that I was failing at getting an erection for women, like, really, like, crippled me. And it also made me think that there was something wrong with me because I would be told by other people that I should be getting an erection from watching these things, even though I wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
When in reality, I was really just creating traumatizing experiences for myself. Yeah. Now, going into when I was dating that girl, she was actually the president of another sorority at UGA. And I think that's kind of why I felt attracted to her, and not attracted, but why I think I felt drawn to her. Is in all of the girls that I'd ever pursued, it was kind of all about how would they make me look as a person. I definitely grew up in a very image-oriented family, and so, like, image was always a big thing for me, thinking about that, and I think that's true for a lot of Christian leaders as well. But I remember I truthfully enjoyed telling people that I was dating the president of the sorority
Of course.
more than I actually enjoyed dating the president of the sorority. And I remember specifically, it was one of our last dates. We went out to eat, and she didn't live too far from Athens, and so we went out to eat in her hometown. I planned the whole thing. It really was romantic. But we ended up finishing the night at her parents' house, and I ended up smoking a cigar with her father. And I felt like such a badass because I was sitting there with like bourbon and a cigar, just like risen up, her dad, her mom. I felt so accomplished.
I made it.
Yeah, really.
Finally. Here I am.
And on the way back to Athens, we were driving, and I had asked if I could hold her hand because that's the farthest I went with her. And I remember my counselor saying, like, Connor, you know, one of the things about guys, especially like you, because you've really never done anything physical, like, whenever you like really experience a physical interaction with a girl, you should get aroused. And so I remember holding her hand in the car and being like, oh. Like, is it coming yet? Like, am I gonna get a boner? Like, ooh, like, come on. I remember trying so hard. And my hand fell asleep. There was no blood flow happening anywhere. And from that moment, no, but really that was kind of the tip of the iceberg. And then that kind of relationship crashed and burned. But that was really the tip of the iceberg of holding this girl's hand, not wanting to hold her hand, not wanting to get an erection. I was like, okay, this feels so unnatural and so wrong. And I don't think that it's this specific girl. I think it's a girl. And so I remember going back to my next counseling session, and I told my counselor my story. And at this point, like, I hadn't like accepted it to myself, but like I kind of knew it was coming. And he was like, Connor, and this is like, my counselor was like a really jacked guy, specializes in sex therapy. He was like, Connor, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think you're attracted to women, and I think you're attracted to men. So you got 3 options, okay? You can either continue to date women and marry one. I'm not going to suggest that one, but a lot of people do it. You can be celibate. You can see what you believe about celibacy, or you can see what you believe about dating a man. And I remember him just even saying those words, dating a man, because that was so negative in my head and like so guarded off. Like, police tape, dating a man, no, like that's somewhere that you cannot go. And him saying that, and I was like, oh my God, what do I believe about that? Because in reality, for my entire life up to that point, I had only ever thought what other people had thought, or thought what other people had told me. I had never really thought about the issue for myself. And so this was in December and January of my junior year. It is really when I kind of going down the spiral of like, oh my God, like I don't even know what I believe about homosexuality. I've just always been told that it was sinful, and I grew up in a family that believed it was sinful, and that just believed that it was morally wrong. But what do I believe? And so that January, I decided to read the Bible in its entirety in a month. Yeah, crazy. It's called the Shred Plan.
Did nothing else except for reading.
Yeah, lliterally. It's like 2.5 hours a day, a lot of listening. And there's some, love you, Jesus, but there's some boring aspects of the Bible. But Second Chronicles is really interesting, but not after you read Second Kings.
Yeah, you're doing it again.
Yeah.
You're just doing everything
exactly.
again.
And there's like slight differences, and that's cool, but I don't know. And the whole purpose of me doing that was at this time I was debating going into ministry, but a large part of it was the fact, okay, I actually don't have any idea what I believe about homosexuality or about sex in general. And I also have never read the Bible in its entirety before. So I think this is important. So over the course of that time, I underlined, highlighted anything that mentioned sex, sexuality, marriage, relationships, and anything in the Bible that I was like, whoa, that's something crazy. Or like, whoa, like that's really different than what I used to be taught. And over the course of that semester, the spring semester of my junior year, a lot of pivotal beliefs that I had within Christianity started to topple. And really there were things that I grew up that I used to believe were sinful started toppling as well. So the first one was not homosexuality.
I was getting some examples.
Yeah, the
here,
first
man.
one was actually whether or not you could date someone who was Christian. I grew up in a very Southern Baptist church that very much taught that it was sinful for you to date someone who was a non-believer.
Right, of course, yeah.
first off, there's nowhere in the Bible that says that. And really rarely in the Bible does it ever talk about, I mean, it never talks about dating, but rarely does it really even talk about relationships before marriage in general. But specifically, there's a chapter and verse in Matthew, the book of Matthew, where Jesus talks about how if you are married to someone who is a non-believer, but you are a believer, they will actually be saved. Now, there's a lot of deep theological interpretation and meaning to what that could mean, but in reality, Jesus just acknowledged that it was okay for you to be married to someone who was an unbeliever, which is very different than anything that I had ever heard growing up.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
And really that didn't click until I was living in the fraternity house at the time, and a guy who lived right across the hall from me, he ended up attending and serving at another popular Baptist church in Athens. And he was a small group leader, a middle school small group leader. And he had also been recently pursuing a woman who was not a believer. She was open to Christianity, but she was not a believer. And that was something that he was wrestling with, was, can I continue to pursue her even though she's not a believer? And he ended up going to the middle school pastor at that church, the Baptist church that he served at, and just asked his opinion, just because he wanted some counsel and wisdom. And the pastor ended up telling him, like, no, you can't, like, that's sinful, like, that's crazy, da-da-da-da. And the next day ended up calling him and saying, hey, because you've been pursuing this girl who's not a Christian, I don't want you to be a small group leader anymore because you're not being a good Christian.
Whoa.
And basically said that you can come back as a small group leader if you never talk to her again. And he knocked on my door and he came into my room and he was like, Connor, like, I want your opinion on this because I really respect you as a Christian, as a Christian leader. And I was like, bro, I'm going to say this. There's nothing in the Bible that talks about dating and nothing in the Bible that says it's sinful. You can make an argument that it's unwise, but even then, that's just using theology and not really using biblical principles. So that's bullshit. Like, I literally said that. I was like, that is absolute bullshit. And the fact that he is judging you in that way is really un-Christ-like. And in that moment, something clicked in me of, oh my God, there was a biblical value, put that in air quotes, there was a moral biblical value that was instilled in me at a young age that was wrong. That I don't believe anymore. And that was the first hurdle that I had to jump over to really start unpacking what was my real theological belief in Jesus and in the Bible. The next one was whether or not women could be leaders and pastors in a church, and specifically if women could teach. Now, granted, there are a variety of verses in the Bible that talk about women not being able to preach. There are a variety of verses in the Bible of saying that women can preach, specifically by Jesus. And so that was the next hurdle of I used to fervently believe that women could not be pastors. Then I was like, that's bullshit. And I think that women can be pastors. And even at the church that I worked at, the one that was kind of connected to North Point, we have never, and I think still never, have had a real female communicator on stage just by themselves. Wow. And they will swear up and down that it's not because of gender or whatever else, but the truth is in the action. Yeah. And there are many people, women specifically, on staff at that church who think that the higher up leaders are not being respectful of women and believing that women can be leaders in that way. Women can also not be elders of that church and a variety of other things. And so, but at the same time, I remember having people tell me this or saying like, oh, women can't preach, women can't teach this church, whatever else. And at the same time, my boss at that church was a woman. And very specifically, the Bible says that women cannot have authority over a man. Yeah. And I'm like, girl, this woman could fire me. And I think that's okay. And I would argue that she has more authority over me than a preacher ever would on a Sunday. So right now, y'all are being hypocrites. And I remember thinking that in my head and continuing to unpack. And by the end of that semester, so this was around May, I really had came to a theological place that I did not think homosexuality and homosexual relationships, at least in the way that I wanted to practice, in a monogamous, healthy, sexually healthy way, was I did not believe that was sinful. However, and there were a lot of things that pushed me to that. Andy Stanley gave a message at a Drive conference, basically where he was saying that the modern church needs to accept the fact that there are actually gay people and not just straight people with a sin problem, and said the specific line that gay Christians have more faith than he does, which was a huge deal, huge impact on my faith. But regardless of the fact that theologically I thought homosexuality wasn't sinful, I still could not go over the hurdle of me being gay, of accepting that yet, just because of all the trauma that word specifically had in my life, of the bullying and things like that. And I really wasn't ready to accept it either. And so between the month of May and June of, this was 2022, in my fraternity house, I was pretty much alone in the house at the time because everyone else had gone off and I was working at the church over the summer. Every night I would light a candle in my room, turn off the lights, play some worship music, or just be in silence and just pray to God, saying, God, convict me of this if I need to be convicted, or show me the way if this is how you want me to live my life. And every night, over and over, I would pray this, and I would hear things, and I would pray this, and I would read things, and I would pray this, and I would pray this. And it kind of ended with me taking a trip to Dallas Theological Seminary out in Texas. A lot of very popular mega church pastors go to DTS. It's not a Baptist seminary, but it's pretty Baptist. Very conservative seminary. And I had done research online about their theological views, and I had known that they believed that marriage was between a man and a woman, but I didn't think that there was going to be anywhere that there was going to be a problem with me being a homosexual or with a homosexual relationship. And yet I wasn't in a place to accept that yet, but I was just thinking, like, future, if this was ever something I wanted to explore, is this something I can? And I remember going out to Texas and being in a room with one of the admissions officers, and he was like, oh, also, like, there is something that you need to sign before you can get accepted. It's our human sexuality statement. And basically in that statement, it said that you couldn't be acting homosexual. And I remember reading that being like, man, if I go to this school, I'm never going to come out of the closet. And I'm never going to experience or even open up this side of myself that I've kept hidden for so long. After that, I was hanging out with a buddy in Dallas. I was staying with him. He was one of my buddies from high school. And I knew that he was same-sex attracted. He didn't know that, but I had actually found gay pornography on his computer in high school, and I never mentioned it to him, but I had known that it was something that he struggled with. And he went to a different school in Georgia, and was in a fraternity, and so I just wanted to see where he was at with it. And so I just, a very simple question, just asked him, hey man, like, what do you, like, are there any gay guys in your fraternity? Just like kind of going fishing. He was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, no, we would never let a gay guy in our fraternity. Like, if there was a gay guy that ever flirted with me or talked to me, I would punch him in the face right then and there. And I remember being in that car, because we were in a car at the time, and hearing how hateful his words were, and knowing that he hated himself. And that's where this hate came from.
Wow.
And I remember being in that car, and Jesus really telling me, Connor, I don't hate you. I don't hate you in the way that you hate yourself. And you need to realize that. And so a couple of days later, I was back in Athens praying again. It was June 16th. And hello.
Hang on a second.
Gotta love Atlanta.
That I will have to edit. Okay, wow. Alright, we just speak peace over them in Jesus' name. Okay, you're just peaceful. We're gonna be peaceful. It's alright. Okay.
I think we're good.
Goodness gracious.
Little horn break. But I was back in Athens in June and praying again at night. And I just felt the Spirit come over me and say, Connor, this is who you are.
I gotta put my hands on him. What is happening? Are you actually okay? Oh, it's like somebody in an Uber or something. They
That's
have a really
crazy.
nice car. It's like pretty colored too. Hang on, I have to go outside and be nice. What's happening? For real though? Are you okay? Yes. Is it blue? Like, are you actually okay? Alright, we're just gonna. Alright, they need peace. They need peace.
That's crazy.
Peace to you, sir or ma'am. or non-gendered person. Okay, we're going?
Oh,
Oh, we're going? We're leaving. Okay. We're gonna have a peaceful night, whatever it is.
that's
Oh.
crazy.
Whoa, oh, wait, why is it on the circle? Oh no. Okay, alright, we're going down the street.
Okay.
They didn't leave. Whoa.
That's crazy.
wild.
That was like one of the longest horns I've ever heard in my life.
Like, goodness gracious. And it's Atlanta, people don't usually use their horn here.
No,
You're like, wait, what's happening?
that's crazy.
Okay, so you were explaining to me about the young man that you obviously kind of saw in high school.
Yeah.
He was clearly same-sex attracted, but was kind of like big time in the closet,
Yes.
Haggard style.
Yes.
And so you're asking him, and are you in a group, like you in a car with other people?
No,
Or is
just
it
us
you
two.
guys?
Just us two.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and he's dated girls in the past and whatnot. And my friends in high school, Christian school, like use the F word a lot, like fag, use the N word a lot. All white boys, and we're definitely very homophobic and still are. So and racist. So it did not shock me that he kind of came from that, and we went to the same church and all that. So he was in a fraternity called KA, Kappa Alpha, which is like known as like a really big old row fraternity. Old row meaning like oldest, coolest, but also like strictest when it comes to like reputation. Like, you know, they're really caring about the reputation, so they want the best guys, and I don't think gay falls into that category. So I think there's a lot kind of to do around that, but yeah, going out of that and just kind of that self-hatred that he experienced and that I knew that I had inside of me. Going back to Athens, I was just praying. I think it was 2 days later, just praying one night, and I just felt the Spirit come over me and just saying like, Connor, this is who you are, and this is how I made you, and that's okay. And I actually have a note in my notes app on my phone from that night of just kind of spiritually dumping kind of what I felt like I was hearing from the Lord. Just kind of freeing me from the shackles of shame that I had put on myself for so long. And that the world had put on me as well. And from that point is really when I would say that I called myself gay. And when I thought that was okay, and that having a relationship was okay. A lot of gay people and queer people will go through a phase of thinking that celibacy is the right way to go. I never went down that path, because I very much understood that God created us to be in relationships. Now, I think choosing celibacy is a wonderful thing, and if you feel led to do that, then that's great, but I kind of knew that God was not leading me to choose celibacy, and that was not a desire of my heart. So I really never understood that argument that all gay people had to be celibate. It just didn't make sense to me at all. So really from that point in June, I felt like I was gay, and really accepted that. But at the same time, I knew that was probably going to alter a large part of my life. I knew that my parents were not going to be accepting of that whatsoever. I thought that most of my friends were not going to be accepting and supportive. At the church that I worked at, there was a contract that I signed that said that you could not be a practicing homosexual and work at this church, or serve at that church, or at least serve in leadership or family ministries. And in the fraternity that I was a part of, I didn't think that I was going to lose my membership or anything, but I'd known 4 years ago that a guy had ended up coming out. And at that point, 4 years ago, they actually had a provision in the covenant that I mentioned earlier that you could not be acting homosexual. But they ended up taking that out.
Wow.
And so under my assumption, I thought that okay, maybe they were a little bit more accepting, but I just had to, refrain from having sex with guys and whatnot, which I was totally fine with, because really my sexual morals pretty much stayed the same from all of that. But I knew that a lot of the guys in the fraternity were not going to be supportive if I came out as gay. And so I kind of knew that this was going to affect a large part of my life. And so at the time, I was not planning on really coming out until, or at least making that information super public, until after I graduated from college. In the months or in the weeks that followed, I ended up coming out to my counselor as gay, not just as same-sex attracted. Came out to a couple of friends who were all super supportive and knew that they would be. And then ended up coming out to my dad. My dad had actually previously asked me about a month prior, before I kind of accepted it, if I was same-sex attracted. And I said yes, and we both were crying. And I told him I was still kind of figuring out where I stood on the issue. And at a wedding that we went to in July of 2022, I told him, I remember watching the wedding, having the people do their wedding vows as a heterosexual wedding, and just believing, man, I want this so bad, and I know that God has this for me. And it was me and my dad in a car driving from Alabama, and I just told him, I was like, hey, this is where I'm at, and he was like, I love you. I don't agree with this, and I don't support it, but I love you, and I'll figure it out. And I told him that I didn't want him to tell my mom, and that we needed to figure out a way to tell her, because I knew, and this is different than most families, I knew my mom was going to take it worse than my dad. My dad is a lot more of a level-headed thinker. My dad's a peacemaker. And me and my dad had already talked about it. I knew my mom was going to take it a lot harder and a lot more emotional than my dad was. And so a couple of weeks later, I ended up telling my mom in August, right before I went back to school. And my dad was in the room. And it went fine. I told her, and then she didn't really say anything, and so I kind of just started word vomiting to fill the awkward space. And the first words out of her mouth were, "I love you," which I'm very grateful for. And then she kind of stopped talking. And then she said, "I love you again, but I'm never going to be able to support you in this." And, that hurts. But in reality, I was still grateful that she had at least, loved me, and that was okay, and whatnot. We kind of continued the conversation, and it was okay. But I remember kind of leaving the room and then going to say something to them after they had gotten to their bedroom. And I remember walking by my parents' bedroom and seeing my mom kneeling at her bed and praying. And I was like, man, our prayers are probably totally different. And that, kind of, I don't know, it hurts to know that your parents pray for something different than what you so fervently believe. But I digress. Going into that school year, our relationship, me and my parents' relationship, was definitely really rocky. We were really close before then, but after that, it really definitely took a downward spiral. Still a big leader in the fraternity, was still living in the fraternity, was still working at the church. I ended up telling my boss at the church, and he actually was incredibly supportive. Our college pastor, he and I are actually still really close friends to this day. I don't know if I would necessarily say that he's affirming, and I don't really know if he would even say if he has any real theological solidifications on the issue. But if he had it his way, I would still be working for him. And if that's not affirming, then I don't know what is. But he told me that, if I decided that I wanted to act on that, or if I wanted to make the information of me being gay public, that I was probably going to have to shoot that up the food chain at the church, just because we knew that it was a problem with me being on staff. And so, and I kind of knew that. I didn't think that was going to be a problem. I was just honestly grateful they didn't fire me on the spot. And he and I just grew so much deeper through that conversation. Remember the next week, my parents ended up coming up and visiting me in Athens. And that was probably one of the worst conversations that we ever had. We were out to dinner, and my parents pretty much said that I needed to step away from any Christian leadership role that I was in, because I was going to be a false teacher and be judged in heaven, and that God was looking really negatively on me in this season. And it was really hard. My parents had been very encouraging of me going into ministry. Well, they kind of got around to me going into ministry. At first, they didn't want me to go into ministry because they thought I was going to be poor, and money's a big thing in our family. But it really hurt to know that my parents, who used to be my biggest supporters when it came to being a Christian leader, now thought that I was no longer fit to lead, just because of not even something that I had acted on. Like I really still had not even acted on this, but just something that I identified as, and that was really difficult. But around the same time is when I was in the process of becoming nominated for homecoming court for UGA. And there's 5 people, 5 guys, 5 girls on homecoming court. It's a really big deal. And it was a dream of mine ever since really middle school. My sister was on homecoming court and ended up winning homecoming queen of her high school in high school. And the high school that I went to did not have homecoming court. But it was always kind of a dream of mine to be on one. Then I remember going to UGA my freshman year and seeing the people on the court and being like, that's going to be me one day. And it's a really long, very competitive process to get on the court. And I remember praying the night before I found out that I made it on, praying to God, saying, God, like, honestly, this is probably not at all to do with you. Like, you know, this is like, there's probably going to be no praise to you. Like, this is probably just because of my own pride that I want to be on homecoming court. But if you can make this be to your benefit at all and make this happen, then please make it so. And I found out I got on homecoming court the next day, and was a huge joy in my life. But I would also say that homecoming court in a lot of ways saved my relationship with my parents, because it gave them something to be proud of me for, and it gave us something to talk about, just because, you know, my whole family wanted to come and support me, extended family, because a lot of our family had been in homecoming court. My aunt was homecoming queen in Auburn when she went, so like homecoming was a big deal, and so a lot of people wanted to come to the game and come to the parade, and there were a bunch of events that we did, and we're really treated like celebrities, and it was lovely. But that was a huge thing for us, and through homecoming court, I ended up representing all of these different areas on campus, these Christian areas. And really, I was kind of known as the big Christian guy on court. And I think that's why the campus as a whole, and we'll get to this in a second, really was shocked at some of the events that followed in the coming months. So homecoming happened, amazing. Me and my parents really kind of hit back at a point that was really good. For a long time, my parents thought that being gay was a choice. And at this point, they still thought that, but we were working through it, and they were wanting me to wait as long as I could to come out or come out to anybody. At this point, I was starting to want to come out in December. So a couple of months from then, just because I had 1 semester left of college. And I really kind of wanted to be able to experience what it was like to be gay and be in college. But I, you know, also was still on the table for me to come out after graduation. But what was really holding me back was the fraternity. And so I remember I scheduled a meeting with our national advisor. So basically all fraternities, they have these consultants that are from the national office, so older people, that come and meet with you every semester. And I was really close with our national consultant, and he actually came the week after homecoming. And I knew that in our fraternity, especially because of how Christian it was and how centrist it was, most all of the big decisions happened by nationals, not by our local chapter. And so I knew if I came out, and if there were any decisions that had to be made, it was going to be made by nationals. And so I really wanted me to be able to come out and nationals be on my side and say, hey guys, for those of you who are like kind of not supportive of this, like Connor's been transparent with us every step of the way, like we support him, we love him, get on board. And so I went into that conversation hoping for that, and thinking that was going to be the outcome. And so we sat down in my room in the fraternity house, and I basically just opened up my heart about how I accepted that I was gay and everything that led up to that, and so many Christian and spiritual moments that pushed me to that point. And there are even more that we wouldn't have time to talk about. In that conversation, I finished, and he said, well, Connor, thanks for telling me. I'm just going to tell you that I don't agree with the stance that the fraternity takes, but because I'm a representative of the fraternity, I'm going to have to share that. So do you want to know what our stance is as a fraternity? And he started kind of going into the fact that the fraternity views any type of homosexual relationship or homosexual action as sin. And then proceeded to talk to me about how 2 guys who had come out in the last year across the country in the fraternity had ended up getting kicked out of the fraternity. And so I don't know if he would admit this, but to me, he very much was communicating that if I came out or if I acted on it in any way, that I was gone. Case in point, done. Which is wild, because there were a lot of other sexual sins that happened in the fraternity, whether it was guys like having sex before marriage with women or whatever else, and nothing would ever happen. Like everyone would know about it and nothing would happen. Even though we had all these rules, in my time in the fraternity, only one guy had ever been kicked out of the fraternity, and that was because he said the N-word. But besides that, no one else had ever been kicked out, really had ever been seriously reprimanded, especially for any type of sexual ethic. And so the fact that they were interpreting sexual morality to be that was just such a shock to me. And I remember after that conversation, I was just bawling my eyes out, kind of having anxiety attacks, and I just kind of felt like I had kind of like a peaceful moment after that of God just saying, Connor, it's time for you to take out your roots of this place, and it's time for you to move on, because you're not going to be able to grow here. And because there was a short time where I thought, well, I guess I'm just going to stay in the fraternity, I'm going to stay in the closet, I'm never going to tell anybody else, and I'm just going to wait till I graduate. And I just really felt like God saying, Connor, this is not how you're going to grow. This is not your place anymore. And even though you've grown so much here, this is not it. And so it was a Tuesday. And by Wednesday, I knew that my time in the fraternity and my time in the church were going to be coming to an end very quickly. And so, and I also knew that housing was going to be a real issue. Because I was living in the fraternity at the time, I knew if I had gotten kicked out that I would be immediately kicked out of the house as well. That's a scary thought. And I knew if that I left the fraternity that I was going to have to move as well. And so I was in talks with some people on campus, specifically in UGA's Student Care and Outreach program. And I'd met with them that Friday and basically was like, hey, this is my situation. And the girl there literally was so amazing. She was like, Connor, I want you to know, like, you technically fall into the category of risked homelessness as a student. And I remember her saying that, and me being a very privileged white man started bawling just because I just never thought, like, I like, she was telling me this, and I was like, I need you to stop. And I need to have a moment. And I just started bawling and crying because I'd never thought that was a category that I was ever going to fall into. But she said, you fall into this category, and we actually have money, scholarship money, that we would love to give you to support you through this. So we want you to know that if something happens, that we will pay for whatever, for however long. And if your parents don't support you, because I didn't know what my parents were going to do at the time either, that we got you. And even though that conversation happened on a Tuesday, by that Friday, the university had offered to pay for a hotel for however long I needed to. And another close personal friend had offered a room for me to stay at in the spring semester because they were studying abroad. And literally within days, like, I remember like praying to God and hearing this from God. Like, God just told me, Connor, like, I told you I'm going to get you through this, and I told you this is the right decision. You just worry about yourself. I'm going to put everything else together. And so community fell in line. My physical situation fell in line. And if that's not a clear sign from God that says, continue to do this, please, I don't know what else will. And so from there, I started pondering how I wanted to make the information public. It's not like being gay is like a huge part of my identity. It's who I am. But in reality, on the list of things that make Connor Lamb, it's like down there. And so I didn't really ever feel like I needed to do an Instagram post or anything like that and make a big deal about it. But I knew that it was going to cause a stir amongst a lot of people in my life. And I didn't want to have 500 different conversations about me being gay and coming out. And I didn't want rumorville to start of like, oh my God, Connor's gay now. He's, out there having sex with everybody and all this different stuff. Which, like, I'm glad they think that I have that much pull. But yeah, and so I just started praying about how I want this big public. So that next week, I met with one of the members of our leadership team at Athens Church, which is kind of like the core 5-6 people that run the church, and basically told him the situation. And he was like, well, Connor, you know what we believe, so what do you want to do about this? And I basically extended kind of an offer of, hey, I will leave peacefully if I can do it at this certain time, and kind of offered some kind of parameters around me leaving. We had a theological conversation. That was that, and ended up telling my boss a little bit later. He actually didn't know the situation, and I remember meeting with him and saying, hey, like, going to be coming out in December, and that's when I'm going to be finishing up in staff. And we both started crying, and he was really upset that this was having to happen, but he kind of understood where I was coming from and also understood where his church was coming from. And we started planning out how that was going to look. And then I started planning out how I wanted to look for the fraternity. And so I met with the president of the fraternity, ended up meeting with the national president of the fraternity, just to talk about what I wanted that to look like. And I proposed that I was going to make a speech at our last chapter in December and move out that night into a hotel, and that I would be granted early alumni status. It was a very common thing for guys to be granted, and that I was still going to get to go on our spring formal, which guys who get early alumni status get. Our local president was very much on board, but our national president was not, and basically was like, nope, like, you're actually going to have to pay to get out of the house. You're not going to be able to do any of this stuff. You're not going to be able to call yourself an alumni, and you're not actually going to be able to tell anybody that you're gay. And I remember being like, when we were on Zoom at the time, I was like, so, let's talk. If I don't tell anybody that I'm gay, and people just find out, it's going to look a lot worse on you. Because if anybody is as prominent of a member of this fraternity next to the president, it's me. And he was like, you're right. You can tell people, but you just can't mention you're gay. And I was like, I'm just saying.
So wait, you can tell people you're gay, but don't mention you're gay?
No, I can tell people that I'm leaving the fraternity, but I just couldn't mention why. And I was like, I'm just going to tell you. This is going to look a lot worse on you than it will on me. And so finally he came around to the idea of me being able to give a speech that I wrote, but that it had to be proofread by them. And you know what? At that point, I was like, that's fine. Some of my closest friends in the fraternity still didn't know. And I still didn't really know how to tell them. There probably were only like 2 guys in the fraternity who knew at this point. But at this point, I started working on a speech and working on preparations for me leaving the house, for me moving out, and for what I wanted to say in the speech. Flash forward, I ended up coming out to some of my closest friends in the fraternity that it was kind of in our small group we called the cell group. 2 of them had actually recently just been elected as officers, and one of them ended up deciding to step down from officership because of the whole situation. And he ended up giving a speech in November about why he was stepping down. And he was like, there's something that's about to happen, y'all, and you don't know it yet, and I can't tell you what's going to happen, but when you know, you're going to understand why I'm stepping down. And he was alluding to me coming out.
Because he was upset by the way you were being treated.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, which was really felt supported by him.
I
know.
Like a lovely friend.
A really great friend.
Wow.
And they were incredibly supportive. Really, most of my friends were. And started making preparations for this and whatnot. And so I set the date, December 4th. That was the last day. My last day at the church was going to be December 11th. The leadership team came back and said that they actually wanted me gone earlier because they didn't want to be known as a church who let someone stay on staff for being gay. But I told them, I'm just going to say this, like, if y'all fire me now, or if I leave now, then it's going to reflect a lot more badly on you versus the fraternity. And I'm going to have to move out of my fraternity a lot sooner because I'm going to have to tell everyone sooner, and this is just not going to be a good situation for any of us. So they agreed that December 11th was the right call. But yeah, so I kind of orchestrated all that, and then just was left with a speech. And God really came to me, and the 5 things that I really wanted to say in that speech were the situation that I was having to leave because I was gay, that it was really hard, but that I still loved Jesus with all of my heart, and that I still loved the guys in the room, and that none of that was going to change. Those were kind of the 5 things that I wanted to cover. And I kind of made the speech funny and whatnot. And so the week came. I had booked a hotel room for the university at the Holiday Inn, Liddy. And so that day, it was a Sunday that I gave the speech. I went to church and did my job, checked into the hotel after church, then went and told the new officers that were coming in that week, because still no one knew, only nationals knew and the president. And then later that night, told the entire fraternity in that speech. And I was so nervous, so anxious, but I ended up getting a standing ovation from everyone in the chapter. And I ended up telling everyone, hey, I'm going to be up in my room packing up my things. If y'all want to come say anything to me or give me a hug or whatever else. And after chapter, about 40 guys ended up lining up throughout the house just to hug me or cry with me or tell me how much I mattered to them or tell me how much I'd impacted their life. And it really was an incredible moment for me, and I felt incredibly loved. And then that night moved into the hotel and spent the rest of that semester in the hotel and moved into another place the next semester. And then told everyone at Athens Church, specifically the people that I worked with, that I was having to leave. And they were all really upset as well. And I would say at Athens Church, about 50% of the staff probably is affirming and 50% of the staff isn't. And I would make the same claim for the church, or for the fraternity that I was in. I would say about 50% of the guys were affirming, and about 50% of the guys, really 25% of the guys probably weren't affirming, but really didn't really know what they believed. And then about 25% were very adamantly against homosexuality. And from that moment of me coming out to the fraternity, that was kind of when I was like my coming out time. From that moment, it spread across campus like a wildfire. I got texts and calls from anybody and everybody who wanted to meet with me and get together with me and talk about what happened, get my perspective. Professors knew about it because they had heard about it from their students. Ministries all heard about it across campus. It was crazy. It caused such a buzz on campus. There ended up being an investigation that was opened against the fraternity that I didn't even open for discrimination, and the fraternity was threatening a lawsuit for religious discrimination back on the university, and it was a whole, and I just kind of got caught in the middle of this, and it was crazy. It really was, because for me, I wasn't even trying to make a platform or a stance on this. I was just trying to live my life, but it was really hard. And it was a really crazy season. But at the same time, because of how widely it spread, I ended up becoming a big leader on campus as the guy who kind of juggled both his sexualities and his Christianity. About 20 guys in the fraternity post me coming out ended up coming out to me in their own way, whether that was about their gender identity or their sexuality or their bisexuality or whatever else. And I was able to counsel them through that and kind of just tell them like, hey, I'm here for you, and you can talk to me about this, and I won't have any shame. And a lot of people who I really impacted, and also a lot of circles on campus, very dark circles, that Jesus had no interaction with, that I was praised in and welcomed in with full open arms. And so really the impact that I was able to have on a lot of people's lives was just... And not even my impact, but the impact that the Lord was able to have was just beautiful. And that's why I would never change my life and never change the hardships that I went through, because I know that God has used it and is still using it for the good of those who love him and for the good of those who aren't. And so I know I just kind of word vomited and trauma dumped for a long time, but that's...
828 is what you alluded to.
Yeah, that's what we got.
So there was something that you said that really stood out to me. It was a while ago, but it's the first thing I really have to go back to.
Yeah.
You said... Now wait, okay, before I go back to that, excuse me. I want to just clarify, and I'm going to be a little cheeky here and say, this whole time, you hadn't had sex. You were a gay virgin. I am actually still a virgin. Oh, I was about to ask you, are you still a virgin?
Yes. So yeah, that's crazy. Whoa. Now I'll say this: I'm still kind of in a weird spot about where I am theologically about sex. I don't know if I would necessarily say that I'm waiting till marriage, but I am waiting for it to be special and for it to be right.
That's lovely. Because
I think in the gay community, the importance and the meaning of sex has been lost. And I will say that up and down. Especially in the homosexual male community, sex is sad, really. And I've had many people try to push me to lose my virginity. Like not even like men, like just friends. Like, oh my God, just go, like, you need to go lose it so you can, do sex, whatever else. And I'm like, I want to be more special than that, Maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic, but like, my first boyfriend actually happened It was kind of a crazy love story. Happened during all of the craziness. So I had a crush on him for the longest time. He was actually the mascot of UGA, Hairy Dog. But we ended up meeting, or he met me at Athens Church. I don't even remember meeting him for the first time, which is terrible. And then we reconnected a couple of times on campus. And then in October, I ended up becoming close with his friends, and we really started interacting through them. And then we started hanging out one-on-one, and he knew that I was gay and that I was coming out because I ended up getting outed in front of him. But I didn't know if he was gay, and really neither did he. And one night, this was right before Thanksgiving, so the month, really actually 2 weeks before all this stuff happened with the fraternity and the church, we were like talking late at night in his room, and one thing led to another, and we were just fully spooning. I remember we were both like, so we need to talk about this, and it kind of went from there. And then I had my first kiss later that week with him, and then we started dating, and it was such a love story, truthfully. And that happened all throughout when I moved out, all that stuff. He would stay with me at the hotel, and I would stay with him at his house a couple of times, and and he really was kind of like my rock throughout all of that, and really was a safe place. Unfortunately, he ended up breaking up with me right at the beginning of January, because I think, and it was very sudden. We went to church together that morning, and he broke up with me that night, out of the blue. And earlier that week, he had made comments about us. Like, we both thought we were going to get married and have kids, whatever else, but he'd made specific comments about future moments, like in May and graduation and stuff. So I had no idea what was coming. And he kind of just told me that he wanted me to be happy, and that he wasn't ready to come out yet, and that I deserved to be with a guy who was out, which I didn't really understand at all, because I really didn't care, because if anyone understood not wanting to come out, it was me. And we really didn't have much of a conversation or clarity, and I would not say that I've gotten any closure since then. We've actually not had a conversation since then. I've tried, but he has not been willing. And that was really hard, because something that I didn't tell you was over Thanksgiving that year, I ended up coming out to my sister. And I thought that she was going to take it really well. She's a couple years older than I am. She's married, lives in Alabama. And she had previously asked me a couple years before if I was gay, and I said no, but she was like, if you ever do come out, like, I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna support you, and the rest of our family might not. But so I assumed if out of anyone in our family, she was gonna be for me. And I came out to her, and it went fine. She kind of seemed shocked. We did it on a walk. Our family's really into walks. And then we finished our walk, and 2 hours later, she asked me to go outside and like talk again. And she was like, Connor, I just want you to know that I'm never gonna be able to support you, and that I think that this relationship that you're doing, and I think relationships in the future could be perceived as you being a groomer.
What?
And
Why?
I think that you calling yourself gay is the same thing as calling yourself a pedophile.
Oh my.
And hearing that from my sister, of like basically being called a pedophile, was really hard. And it kind of cemented the rejection that I really had felt from my family. And from that, I had also felt an immense amount of rejection from the church that I was a part of. And there were even moments where pastors of the church or staff members of the church told me that I couldn't be a Christian, or told me that I was going down the wrong path, or that I was going to get AIDS, die, and go to hell, or that I couldn't, like all these different things. And so I felt an immense amount of rejection from the place that I used to call home, my church, my spiritual home. And an immense amount of rejection from the place that I called my real home, my fraternity, the place that I lived, and the community that I really invested myself in. And although there were a lot of supportive guys, there were a lot of guys who weren't. And so on top of all this rejection from my friends, my community, my church home, my family, to experience rejection then from the relationship that I had, it was just an overflow. And really sent me into a real downward spiral that was really difficult to get out of. And I'm very thankful, because a lot of guys do take that downward spiral and go straight into the sex culture of gay life and take that into the denying Jesus and denying Christians and hating Christians and drugs and all those things. So yeah, but positive thing that we were talking about, first kiss was in December. It was an absolute dream.
December 22.
Yeah, December 22. So a little bit over a year ago. And I've dated and had relationships with other people.
Kiss in your life?
Well, I again kissed girls from musical theater, but it wasn't.
Oh, that's what the musical theater. No, this is your first.
No, this was my first real kiss, and
the girl that you mentioned holding her hand, you said that's the furthest that you went, and that was it.
That was it. That was it with her. So I never really kissed someone who I really was attracted to, or really where it meant anything. And it was, fireworks were going off. It was so sweet. It really was. Yeah, it was amazing. It really was. And that's what I want sex to be too. You know, I want sex to mean just as much, if not actually a lot more, than my first kiss. You know, and I would prefer to have sex with one person for the rest of my life.
Oh my God.
Thank you. And I am kind of a little precious baby. So.
You are though. I'm glad you recognize it. Wow.
But
wow.
Yeah, I will say, going into dating after that relationship, especially being on apps and stuff. Coming from a conservative Christian background, I had no idea how crazy the gay sex culture was. The amount of guys who I would go on a date with, and then they'd be like, "All right, so you gonna bottom or what?" And I'm
Are we gonna talk?
Yeah, you gonna buy me a meal? And then they wouldn't even buy me a meal. I'm like, good Lordy, have mercy. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely a hopeless romantic, and I believe in a fairy tale romance. And who knows if I'll ever get that? But
you will.
You know, I'm hopeful. So
faith without faith without action is dead, definitely. But I was gonna say to you, faith is the substance of things hoped for.
This is true. I have faith. We've established this in Jesus' name.
Amen. I'm excited. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you, because it's your story is so interesting to me, and it's so interesting because you did so much standing up for yourself, for somebody who we talked about it a little bit when we were eating, and I said to you there's a set of kind of things that go with these stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that people say. It's gay man, sex, blah, blah, blah. Especially, you said, I wanted to be able to have the gay experience at college, which straight away in my mind, I'm orgies,
Yeah, which is true. And is scary.
Gay male orgies is what comes to my brain.
Yeah, it's hey, your ticket in is Truvada. I'm okay,
So, yeah, and then but also at the same time, Connor, I want to say it to you, and I don't mean to be it might sound condescending, but I really mean it from my heart. You're so pure in the sense of the things that you're saying. You were talking to me about shame and about feeling shame from pornography, right? And you mentioned, it really resonated with me because it reminded me of trying to be straight myself and actually having sex and feeling that shame. And I remember there was a period in my life
This is Connor's story, not mine. So I have to stop it there, and I can't play you guys any more of that conversation, at least for right now. For right now, I'm just going to ask you that if it felt interesting to you, then stay tuned and hear the end, which is actually the beginning. And what I think is maybe the most powerful things that Connor had to say, which happened literally just moments after I asked for his, approval to record this and use it for a podcast, as I do. And then this is what he said. And he opened his heart. And if you'll let him maybe this time touch yours, I think you'll never be the same.
I think as we dive into my story, especially over the past 2 years, but over the last 22 years that I've lived on this planet, the last year and a half have really been tough. But I'll also say, and I was really convicted of this a couple of weeks ago in church that over the last like month or so, God has just answered pretty much all of my prayers in full.
Whoa.
Truthfully, yeah.
That's great. Jeez.
And like all the prayers that I've had for the last like 8 months, now like, am I still praying for a boyfriend? Yeah. Has that one been answered? No, but that's okay. Like, you know what? Well, I can be patient on that one, but strong Christian community, strong male presence, male friendships in my life has been one that I've been praying for. I'm just feeling like I have a future, and feeling like I have faith. Just all these things have really been coming together the last couple of weeks. And so I guess starting off, I just want to say, before we kind of get into the trauma of it all and maybe some of the critiques of the Jesus world and the Christian world, that God is good, that he is a good God. And that really, that I'm so grateful for all of the crap that I've been through and all the experiences that I've had, just because it's made me see how good of a God he is. And I think I was really convicted of that this last week, of just like, man, like he's good. He's good.
What makes you say that? Like, what makes you say that in such a way where I ask you, do you have anything to say? And you're like, yeah, I have a conviction. God's good.
Yeah.
He's doing great. Like, why? Like, what makes you say that?
I think one of the things that I've really been wrestling with over the last year and last couple of months, that I think everyone wrestles with to a degree, but specifically I think I was kind of forced to be put in the situation, was answering the question, why am I a Jesus follower? Or why am I a believer? Because I used to be, at UGA, I used to be the pinnacle of a Christian. I used to be the professional Christian. I used to be the representative of a Christian on UGA's campus, and used to be praised for that. And then in a matter of weeks, days, really, I went from being the pinnacle of what a Christian is, of who Christian is, to being told by many Christian leaders and by many Christian institutions as a whole that I could no longer be a Christ follower because of how I identified or because of who I was. And, when people repeatedly tell you that you cannot be something that you wholeheartedly identify with, you really wrestle with that. And I think when people who are Christians or Jesus followers hurt you, you can oftentimes ask yourself about whether it's beneficial or real or not to follow the one that they worship as well.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
But kind of through that season, I think I really realized to a very deep level of why I'm a Christian and why I am specifically a Jesus follower. And I kind of use those words synonymously, even though I know that they're not. But I believe in Jesus because of the hope that he gives me and because of the life that he has given me. And I think nowadays, especially, like we as humans, we're just all trying to find hope. My aunt, a couple of months ago, actually committed suicide. She was in her 50s. And man, just the lack of hope that you have in the life that you live on this planet is really what I think is one of the biggest driving factors of suicide and suicidal ideations. And I remember being incredibly suicidal back in my middle school and early high school years. And for me, my suicidal ideation revolved around the lack of hope there was, and the hope that there was in the life that was past this one. And so for me, I think really just coming to terms with the fact that, man, Jesus is my hope. And even in all of the hard situations that I endure on this earth, that he is the hope through that as well. And that he is good, and that God is good because of that hope, and that God is good because of the difficulties that we have. And I think another question that is really difficult for a lot of people to answer, and I don't know if this is really a real answer, but it's a real answer for me. The question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, first off, what's the definition of a good person? What's the definition of a bad person? But I also think, the reason why we kind of endure things is because we see how real life is. If we didn't experience pain, we wouldn't know what real happiness is or real joy is. If we didn't experience love, we wouldn't know what real hate is. If we didn't experience hate, we wouldn't know what real love is. If we didn't experience failed relationships, we wouldn't really know if one was successful.
Wow. That's,
And so I think because we experience the brokenness of this world, we can see the perfection of God. And because of that, he is good. So, sorry if that was a long-winded answer, but...
No. I mean, I guess I want to, dare I say, because of your answer, especially mentioning your aunt, which I'm sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
But, dare I say, it goes into what, I was saying when you first got here, which was like, it's hard out here, and it's like easy to give up.
It is.
And so like, is there any inspiration that you can give to people who are like, well, it's all good and fine you say that about God, but like, God had never done anything for me, right? Or like whatever, like maybe somebody more cynical who's like, I don't see the point in it, or like what makes you so sure?
Yeah. I think whenever it comes to like giving advice, especially to people who are in such vulnerable places, a lot of times people are unwilling to hear the truth. And I'm not, here to necessarily say what that, truth is, or I'm not trying to mansplain truth or whatnot. But I think when you are in a difficult place, the most important thing that you have to be is honest with yourself. And you have to be honest in answering the difficult questions. And so rather than kind of give advice, my advice would be is to answer kind of these questions for yourself of, why are you alive? Like genuinely, why are you alive? Do you have an answer? Is that answer valid? Is that one that you inherited from your parents? Why are you? And then my follow-up answer is, where do you struggle? Like what are the deepest, most difficult areas in your life? Whether that's your insecurities, it's your pain, your trauma, your past. Where is that struggle coming from that might be putting you in a position of being in a dark place? And then from that, where is your hope? Because in reality, we all have hope in something. Now, it might not necessarily be a positive thing that we have hope in. But I know for me, when I was in such a dark place, and this was really before I even understood who Christ was and what all that meant for me, I really put my hope in the idea that my pain was going to go away after I died and after I killed myself. And my aunt was kind of in the same place. And she wrote a bunch of letters and did a bunch of things about how she was, she was killing herself because she was hopeful for a lack of pain in the next life. And I'm not going to discourage her for believing in that. But I also don't think that it's impossible to have hope here too. And I think that if you really be honest with yourself about where that hope is, about if that's and then asking yourself, is where I put my hope healthy? And is where I put my hope sustainable? Because if you're not honest with yourself about those four things, then the pain that you have, the darkness that you have, is just going to continue to fester. And in reality, no matter what anybody else tells you is not going to matter unless you begin to be honest with yourself. And until you can open up your ears to your own heart, you're not going to be able to open up your ears to someone else's.
How do you listen to your heart?
Woo! Sometimes I don't, which is not good. Oh, man. So one of my favorite things to do, and whether this is just listening to my own heart, whether this is trying to hear God, is, I don't know if you've like ever experienced like a sensory deprivation tank before, or do you know what that is?
I imagine just from the words that you're basically immersed in something where you cannot see or hear.
Yeah, or like feel anything. Yeah, I don't do those that often, but one of the things that I do enjoy and practice is in every place that I've lived, or I used to do this in a room at the church that I used to work for, is I would find a room where if you turn the lights off, there was no light anywhere. Like there was no light showing. Sometimes I would tape up stuff, or try to like block light, and try to make it as also silent as possible, where you literally cannot see your hand in front of your face. Then that it's that dark, and the only sound that you can really hear is your heartbeat. And when I'm in like a space like this, my purpose is, because when you're in a space like this, the only thing that truly exists that you can see or feel is your soul. That's the only thing that's there, you know? Like you might be able to feel the ground and whatever else, but in reality, in an absolutely pitch black space, what does your soul look like? You know, your physical body's gone, your, you know, physical attributions, pain might still be there, but in reality, first off, who are you when it's just your soul there? How can you listen to yourself when it's just your soul? And then how can you listen to God or to the spiritual world or to, you know, however you want to connect with the divine? But for me, that's probably one of the biggest ways. And I think a lot of people experience this similarly when they're laying in bed at night before they go to bed, or they're restless at night. I think that's also a similar experience. It's just oftentimes when we go into the darkness unprepared. So like oftentimes when we lay down to sleep and we're not really prepared for the darkness that we're about to experience, we can end up in darkness.
Wow.
And I know for me that's very true of when I lie restlessly awake at night in the dark and I wasn't prepared for that. You know, the evil one can seep in, or my evil thoughts can seep in, or the evil aspects of my own heart can seep in, or the negative aspects, or the self-hurting aspects. Whereas when you choose to go into the darkness with the light of your own soul and with the light of God accompanying you, really beautiful things can happen, and you can conquer that darkness through it. So I would say that's probably a big one. I'm very blessed to have some beautiful friendships and beautiful relationships in my life with people who can also call out my heart. And I think that's also a very important aspect of the human experience. I think that's why we have community and why we were not put here alone, and why I don't think it's healthy for us to constantly be alone.